Hello everyone, this is Shining Noctiles, and today I figured I would do a kind of a stream for you guys regarding the ancient connection of the classical world, or pretty much other parts of Europe and even the Mediterranean and things of that nature. Essentially, kind of expanding on what I've done in previous videos. I've talked a little bit about the connections of Ireland and Spain in previous videos, where the Irish or some of the Miletians, the sons of Miel Spawn, had come from Spain to Ireland in ancient times, and they were known as the Gaels or Goidelic people. However, I wanted to do another video, kind of really showcasing the kind of a connection not only to Ireland, but actually also to Britain, and not only Britain, but actually England itself. And I think this is especially important with what's been going on the news these past couple of weeks. I actually watched an interview where this one Englishman, who I won't mention his name, but he mentioned that England's history goes around for around 1,000 years, and he believes that England is the best country in the world. However, he doesn't recognize that the history of not only England, but also Britain and really the world itself goes, the history goes beyond 10,000 years. And really, people were not always the same people weren't always on the Isles, in the sense that over uh, centuries or thousands of years there were migrations that took place. However, I think it's very important to touch upon this because actually, um, when I did my video on Ireland and Spain, it was actually a lot of Englishmen, surprisingly, that were essentially trying to um, deconstruct or kind of attack my views of the connection of particularly Spain to Ireland, and because they believed that their ancestry or the ancestry of the Isles, they only came from Northern Europe, which is not true. And I think it's important to especially hone that in, especially towards my English commentators. And I don't want to single them out per se, but I do want to point out that our history goes beyond the Dark Ages. And so I will showcase this here with an ancestral match I had received. It was a 96% match versus all the users, and it was a pre-Roman Britain match in Derbyshire, which I believe is in the East Midlands of England, of modern-day England, and was found in Carsington Pasture Cave. And I'll read this little description just to kind of showcase the kind of the details of this sample. In the rolling hills of Derbyshire, tangled within Britain's stored past, an ancient skeleton once laid hidden within the shadowy embrace of a limestone cave, mirroring a tale of life and death before the island felt the tread of Roman sandals. This individual, sentinel from a distant 2nd century BC epoch, offers us a mute testimony of pre-Roman activities and burial customs practiced by the people who wander the misty landscapes of what we now call Britain. Nestled on Carsington pasture, among the relics found accompanying our quiet ancient, were a trove of offerings, disclosing the spiritual or ritualistic intent of those who laid the dead body to rest. Among these artifacts, the most telltale is a beautifully wrought pyramidal loom weight crafted by local stone. This object, both functional and possibly symbolic, hints at the domestic life and technologies of the time. It allows us to infer that weaving, a crucial skill in the creation of garments and textiles, was well established and valued in this community. And notice here, the matches here are very different than what you would see with modern day English, which would be Anglo-Saxon, maybe Viking. Apologies, Bjorn. I enjoy watching a Norwegian YouTuber. His name is Bjorn. His channel's name is Bjorn Andres Johansen, and he actually recently did a video regarding the current news of what was going on in England, and he actually wanted to apologize for what happened during the Viking raids in the Dark Ages because no, it wasn't quite a pleasant time, and he wanted to apologize for that, but he also wanted to say that that now, thankfully enough, Norway and England are now friends. So he wanted to mention that, and he does feel like a brother to me. He does. Um, he actually talks about the stones, ancient stones laid out in Norway, and it kind of reminds me a bit of maybe Stonehenge. You know, there might be a connection there. But anyways, just wanted to shout him out there. Anyways, so notice the matches here are Cantabria or Cantabrian, and Cantabria is actually a Celtic tribe, or well, it's a group of people who live in Cantabria in northern Spain. And the word Cantabria, that origin word, actually comes from a Celtic origin. It may come from the Celtic words cant or cant, which sounds like Kent or Canterbury, or it also sounds like cantar, which means to sing in Spanish. Or I guess in French you would say chantar. And in Italian is also very close as well, cantar as well. They actually did a genetic study. Some people may not like this, but they did a genetic study that showed that the Romans and the Celts were actually not that far genetically distant. That their genetic kind of distance to each other would be similar to uh, the genetic distance most likely between a modern day Anglo-Saxon Englishman and a Dutchman, or you know, and of course even the Dutch themselves, you know, they do have a little bit of more diversity than people think. But yes, they made a connection to this. So this is maybe one reason why there are words in Proto-Celtic, Proto-Gaulish, and Proto-Italic that the words sound similar because they probably come from a shared language. And actually, even Latin in itself, it actually takes a lot of its words from ancient Greek as well. And we'll see the ancient Greek connection or Mycenaean Greek connection also with the Celts later on as well. But here we have Cantabria can also mean edge or rim. This could mean coastal district, corner land, or land on the edge, which is similar, as I mentioned, to the English counties of Kent and Canterbury. The name may also come from the Celtic word aban, which means river, and it appears in places names like Abanilis, Abadilia, and Abano. There you go. Baño means bathroom in Spanish, by the way, for those who don't know. The Cantabri were an Iberian tribe with Celtic influences who lived in the Cantabrian Mountains along Spain's northern coast until 19 before Common Era, and their descendants that still live there. It says the Romans believed that Cantabri's ancestors migrated to the Iberian Peninsula around the 4th century before Common Era, and were more mixed than other Celtic people on the peninsula. Well, as you know, Spain, or really Iberia, because let's not forget Portugal, and of course Basque, you know, it's all included. It was really a diverse group of tribes that lived in that area since ancient times, and I will mention more of that here later on. But anyways, let me continue. By the 1st century before Common Era, the Cantabri were made of around 11 tribes that formed a confederacy with Araquilium, Castro de Espina del Gallego, as Gallego means really mean Gauls or Gales, or in the Spanish language, as their capital. The Romans eventually subdued the Cantabria, and then it talks about the reorganization of the tribes. Then it says here the Cantabri were an agrarian society that worshipped fertility goddesses related to the moon. These goddesses influenced when to sow and gather crops. Cantabria also had a Celtic group that worshipped a sea god who was later assimilated into the Roman mythology as Neptune. Yes, and so, and by the way, I want to mention my Welsh American friend Ben here, because I know he always gets on my case about the Romans. And actually, it is also part of my ancestry too, because it became part of my Arco EDCE Rainbow and Rainbow. Rainbow is rainbow in Scandinavian, or well, in Danish and Norwegian for those who don't know. But he always mentions to kind of when viewing the Romans, and I guess even ourselves to an extent, because it is part of our ancestry, to really see it from more of a balanced perspective. And so, whenever I speak about this, mention the Romans, I don't want people to always necessarily have a negative view on them, because of course, the Roman Empire was, its own thing. But we have to recognize that not all of the citizens probably agreed with the running of the empire, and you can see this with history of certain leaders that actually led a rebellion against the empire. One of them being Arminius or Hermann Siegfried or Hermann Siggy. I prefer to say Siggy because it really touches on the kind of the Norse ancestry of the Cherusci chief, and that he originally served in the Roman army as an officer, I believe. But when Julius, or I think it was Julius, I'll have to check to make sure because I know my friend Ben probably get on my case about this. Because all right, let me check. Let's see. Yes, it was under Julius, so I was correct on that. Because I know my friend Ben tried to say it was someone else, but no, it was in fact Julius. But anyways, so yeah, so Hermann Siggy, he did serve in the Roman army as an officer at the time, or at least as a high-ranking official in the Roman army. But when Julius wanted to send his armies to conquer, his homeland back in Germania, that's when Hermann Siggy he led a rebellion and he actually defeated 3 Roman legions that day. Um, anyways, so I'm gonna try to see how I can say this. So why am I mentioning him? Because there was another leader. Actually, he might have also been of Welsh descent. Oh, I think I remember his name. He's actually a Welsh Maximus. Yes, and I think he's well known in Wales. So in 383 Common Era, Magnus Maximus, a Roman general from Wales who was also known as Maxen, hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, Weledig, Weledig, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, rebelled against the legitimate emperor Gratian and took the Western throne. Maximus was born in Galicia and served as an officer in Britain under Theodosius the Elder during the Great Conspiracy. In 383, he led a successful campaign against the Picts and Scots, and the army proclaimed him emperor in Britannia. After Gratian's death, Maximus negotiated with Theodosius, the Eastern Emperor, and I think at that time the Eastern Emperor, I think, was of the Byzantine Empire. I'd have to check when the Byzantine, when they had formed themselves. Byzantine Empire formed. Okay, so yes, okay, so that would have been the time of, yeah, was founded Constantinople by Constantine the First. Okay. So it says here, Maximus negotiated with Theodosius and was named ruler of Britannia and Gaul. Maximus's brother-in-law, Valentine II, retained Italy, Spain, Pannonia, and Africa. Maximus's ambition led him to invade Italy in 387, forcing Valentinian to flee to Thessalonica. Thessalonica. Where would that be? That's actually that Greece. Okay, so yeah, because Thessaly is in Greece. I know that for sure. Maximus led his army across the Alps to try to usurp Theodosius as emperor. However, Maximus was defeated by Theodosius' forces at the Battle of the Save in Pannonia, modern Croatia, and the Battle of Petovia in Piju? Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Modern Slovenia. Maximus was able to flee but was later captured and executed. Ooh, wow. In Aquili in August of 388, some historians believe that Maximus's death marked the end of direct imperial presence in Britannia and northern Gaul. So yes, there was quite a connection actually between the Welsh, or well, the Cymry, and the Romans, even before the invasion of the Saxons and the Angles and the Jutes, and that is even true with the Spanish as well, because there were certain tribes such as the Vascone who also, Vascones sounds like cojones. It also sounds like Cuhuelan. And cojones, I'll try not to be vulgar about it, but cojones in Spanish means a manly courage, to put it lightly. Uh, and for anyone who has read about Cuchulainn, which is not only spoken about in Irish folklore but also Welsh folklore, he was also seen as one of the heroes of the, I believe, the Ulster cycle in Irish folklore. And so I will make sure that is correct. Yes, war hero and demigod who's considered one of Ireland's greatest heroes. Yes. So I wanted to to mention that, to be sure, because even though I don't always agree with the Irish pagan school um, on their views on certain things, I at least want to at least be well read on the matter. you know, it just makes sure that I share it in a healing way, as it were. And it says here, Cuchulainn is the son of the Irish god Lugh, and Lugh, actually, my name is Lewis, or my grandma actually calls me Louis. Uh, Louis. It's and also in Spanish, the word for loose is actually, or actually the word for light is loose. So Louis, loose. It all kind of has some kind of a, I feel like, a connection there. Yes. So Lugh and Dictrai, the sister of Connor, who's supposedly the king of the Uliads, I'm pronouncing that right, of northeast Ireland around the beginning of the 1st century before Common Era. Cuchulainn was born at Newgrange, Ireland's most prominent Neolithic monument, with a remarkable birth that some say indicated he was destined to be a hero. He was known for his great size, masculine beauty, and unique appearance, which included 3-colored hair, or dimples on each cheek, 7 toes and fingers on each hand, and 7 pupils in each eye. Cuchulainn was the greatest of the Knights of the Red Branch, warriors loyal to Connor. He was known for his trance-like fury before battle, which caused him to shake, revolve within his skin, and have bestial features. He also had a huge hound that he would enchain to guard his house. In one story, Cuchulainn is mortally wounded by the spear Luidaid after Queen Meh put a spell on him to bring him to battle. However, he refuses to die laying down and manages to tie himself to a stone so he can die standing up with his sword on his hand. His opponents aren't sure if he's dead, so they watch at a distance for 3 days. Eventually, a raven lands on his shoulder, revealing that he is actually the Morrigan, has transferred herself to see his dead body. And I've mentioned the Morrigan a lot in some of my previous videos. I feel like she's kind of been not only kind of like a spiritual ancestor to me, but also kind of like a spirit guide as well, and on my journey. And so I figured I'd mention that. So yes, so we talked about yes, so these were the ancient civilizations that this sample was connected to, or this person was connected to back around over 2200 years ago. So over 2000 years ago, really. And his closest modern matches, and you'll be surprised because it's nowhere do you see Southeast English, Southwest English, or at least modern day populations. This would have been back 2200 years ago, even before the time of the Romans, or at least when the Romans came to Britain. It would have been the French Basque is number one. And I actually watched a video regarding the French Basque that they really enjoy to sing and or to cantar or chantar. And I know the Welsh or Cymry are also very well renowned for their singing abilities as well. And that is something that I've talked to my friend Ben about, and even other. I've even experienced it myself, listening to songs sung in Welsh or in Cymru. I know that Wales actually, I believe that name was actually given by the Saxons who came to Wales, and it was actually meant to refer to uh, uh, to a foreigner or stranger. Yes, Old English. Yes. So, but before Wales, before it was named Wales, so the original name was Cymru. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right. Or I know the language, instead of it being pronounced as Welsh, it's also pronounced as Cymraeg. So you really roll the R's, and so that's makes me think about my Scottish friend Josette. And we'll cover the Scottish here in a moment because there's a match that even she might find surprising because it connects to her trip to Portugal, or that was named the Romans named Portugal that name because it really meant Port of the Gals, Port of the Gals. So it's there's a connection there. So notice here, and by the way, I want to, before I mention continuing on with the Basque, I want to let any Basque people who watch this channel to know, or anyone that feels a connection to the Basque, to know that, because I know some of the Basque, particularly in Spain, I don't know so much with the French Basque, but at least in Spain, some of them are very vocal, as it were, to say, we were the first people here in Spain or in Iberia. However, we have to remind them, in addition to, and that man is not solely an isolated island of ancestral DNA, because what it says is actually the Basque, and I'll see if I can pull up an article here, um, that's actually Basque relation to modern day Spanish, because I really want to hone in on this because I think it's very important for anyone who wants to know this. I think it was like 70% related. Let's see here. Yeah, so it says here, environmental genetic studies have confirmed that Basques share close genetic ties to other Europeans, especially with Spaniards, who have a common genetic identity of over 70% with Basques, and a homogeneity amongst both their Spanish and French populations. And why is that? Why are they so related to each other? It's because most likely what happened is that really the Basque and Spanish, and also some of the French, really the Southwest French, they share a ancestral connection, most likely going back to the Iberians, which were some of the original people of Spain. And the Iberians came to Spain um, around 5,000 years ago. And you can see here the Iberian culture developed in the Iberian Peninsula. And Iberia, by the way, means the whole continent, or not the whole continent, but the whole peninsula. That includes Spain, Portugal, and yes, the Basque Country. All of it, together as one. It would be the Iberian Peninsula. And so the Iberian culture developed in the Iberian Peninsula's eastern and southern coast as early as the 3rd to 5th millennium before Common Era. So that would be around 5 to 7,000 years ago. And by 550 before Common Era, a distinct Iberian culture is evident throughout the peninsula's east and south, not only in the north but also in the south as well. The Iberians were prehistoric people who lived in villages and fortified settlements, and their communities were organized tribally. The name Iberian may come from the Iberius River, and by the time of the Greek historian Herodotus, the term referred to all people between the Ebro and Huelva rivers. The Iberians were influenced by Greek settlements. Okay, and this is very important to mention this because we'll mention Tortesos later on in southern Iberia, which would include southern Spain, southern Portugal, in Eprion and the Alicante region, and by Phoenician trading colonies. And the Phoenicians, by the way, were one of the I would almost call them the 13th tribe or the Elidibus of the or the Themis. I'm mentioning Final Fantasy 14, but they were the 13th that had split from the other 12. It makes me think of Convocation 14, from Final Fantasy 14, which is kind of a representation of the 12 zodiac signs from you know Capricorn or Aquarius to Capricorn, but also um, Ophiuchus, and then also the Sun as well. So 14. To me, I feel like I know who the 14th is, and we'll mention the Aurelians or the Warriors of the Free later on. But anyways, the Iberians were influenced by Greek settlements, and I mentioned the Phoenicians. And actually, the Phoenicians had both influenced the ancient Greek and ancient Iberian alphabets both, because they had a very deep connection across the Mediterranean with both the Tartessians or the some of the original people of Spain, probably also which would include even those further north, which would be the Iberians, and then um, also the ancient Greeks as well. Yes, so this goes back, to Mycenaean and probably even back to Mannonian times, which would be around 3,500 to almost 4,000 years ago. So the Iberians also developed indigenous cities after 600 before Common Era that imitated aspects of the Phoenician and Greek colonies. Yes, because you can see how, eventually, the some of that knowledge, from the south also permeated further north as well. So instead of the knowledge coming just directly from the north to the south, I see it as knowledge coming from the south to the north, or kind of like a rather than the top down, it's more of like a bottom up kind of a foundation kind of being set. Um, yes, and so notice here in the sample we have the French bass, Spanish bass, but also because they really ancestrally have a shared connection to the Iberians, going back, 7,000 years ago, or however long it was. You can also see Spanish Aragon as well as there, which is not part of the Basque Country, but it is still part of Iberia. Because remember, we're talking about Iberians as a whole, or really Iberian, Southwest French, that whole region. So instead of just seeing this small pocket of, okay, that's only connected to only these two small regions. No, it's more of a inclusivity rather than an exclusivity. So, we're including rather than excluding, and that's really, I feel like, is more of the Greek, ancient Greek influence. That goes back to the Mycenaeans and the Minoans, where ancient Greece was really a melting pot of people coming from Africa, Asia, and Europe, uh, since ancient times. So it's kind of a blend, as it were, an arcoides rhyme. But yes, I wanted to mention that. Um, and I think even the Irish professor, he also mentioned Greece as well in his video, and I'll link his video in the description below after this. So Spanish Aragon, Southwest French, so there's Southwest French, Spanish Cantabria, so there's Cantabrians, and these are modern day populations, by the way. Castilla-La Mancha, and Castilla-La Mancha is kind of an area in Spain it's very close to Castile and Leon, and that would be around Madrid. Um, then there's Valentia, which is kind of on the southeastern coast of Spain, and then Andalusia, and then that would be kind of on the southern part of Spain, close to North Africa. And so, Let me see if I can pull this up here. I'm gonna pull up some ancient matches here. You can see some ancient matches here are County Clare, Ireland, 450 before Common Era. And so this would have been 2,500 years ago in County Clare. So this would have been on the west coast of Ireland. So very close to where the yeah, so more so in the southern part of the west coast of Ireland, but still on the west coast. So yes, you can see how it really goes back to ancient Ireland, even back during ancient times. You have the Iberians here, the I think it's Idigets tribe, and this would include like the Volscones, and also and then other tribes as well. And so I'll try to get this here. So and I'll actually pull this up here in a moment. The Idigets were an ancient Iberian people of the Iberian Peninsula who dwelt in the plains of the river Segre and Cinca towards the Iberias River and in and around Irida, Ichida, and they're believed to have spoken the Iberian language. So I think I have some matches here that I'll pull up of this tribe, or descendants of these tribes. Let me see if I can get it. Let me see, because it is here. Yes, it is. I guess they might have misspelled it or something. You see how here this is in Catalan, in Catalonia, which is kind of in northeastern Spain, and this is the year 450 before Common Era. And I'll read this really quick. In the midst of the Iberian Peninsula during the waning years of the 5th century before Common Era, a woman of the Idiaguets tribe, an ancient people known for the warrior culture nestled within present-day Catalonia, breathed her last imbued with the characteristic features of the mitochondrial haplogroup H3. Her genetic signature revealed a tale woven into the broad tapestry of human migration across Ethiopia. And I'll mention where that name Europe or Ethiopia actually comes from, because it goes back to the island of Crete back in ancient times with Zeus and a Phoenician princess actually. So that I'll mention how there's that connection there with the origin of the word Europe or Udape in it's Udape, yeah, in ancient Greek. Narrative of movement and cultural exchange. The Idiaguets, formidable kin to the Celtiberians, carved their stories into the rugged landscape of what we now call Spain. This woman, whom the silent echoes of history have only recently brought to light, was cradled by the earth for over 2 millennia. Upon her discovery, she offered a profound glimpse into the world. She knew when, or I might misspelled that, but knew when dominated by power struggles and intricate social networks. I don't know if this is a word actually, or like a word in English at least. Let me look. Oh, not that I might feel like misspelling. Interred with respects befitting her status, the burial site revealed objects that hold whispers of her life and times, luxurious adornments wrought with precious materials, ceramics crafted with artistic touch, and weapons that bespoke a culture intimately acquainted with conflict signaled her significance within her community. These artifacts collectively hint at the complex social structures, the import placed upon funerary rites, showcasing the rich milieu out of which she emerged. And milieu, I think that's a French word, but let me check. I think it's
Milieu.
milieu, milieu. Yes, personal social environment. But I think it's it comes from French probably. Yes, it does.
Milieu.
No, no. Let me see. How would you say it in French? Let me look. I just wanna. want to see how you would say it just to make sure.
Milieu.
Yeah, milieu.
Milieu.
Milieu. Might take some practice, but yes. And is there a way you would say it in Spanish?
Medio.
Medio. Okay, so medio. Okay, let me make sure I got this right. Okay, so medio. All right. Okay. Uh. So let's see here. The okay. Out of which emerged the weapons and ceramics suggested a society that was as much engaged in domestic craftsmanship as it was in the arts of duality essential for survival in the tenuous world of ancient Iberia. The jewelry, exquisite in workmanship, unveils a narrative of trade and connectivity, indicating that the Irrigates were not secluded, but rather participated actively in the wide network of Mediterranean commerce. And so you can see this is actually a direct match with the Iberians, which actually was connected to the Derbyshire or Derbyshire. I prefer Shire over Shire because it sounds more like we're going to the Shire, not the Shire. I know some of my other friends would want to fight me on that, but you know, I just like Shire more or Shire. I like Shire more. But yeah, you can see with the Derbyshire connection, there is a close match with the Iberians there, and so yeah, so notice just like how with the ancient tribe in Derbyshire, it all the people here in Catalonia were also mostly connected to the French Basque, the Spanish Basque, but also have a closer connection with because again there was a mixture, especially probably for those who stayed in Spain or instead of migrating to the islands, those who still stayed in uh, in Spain, they over time they would mix with the melting pot was still in full swing, as it were. Not to say that the melting pot didn't exist so much in the islands, but in the islands, since they were more isolated, it would have been harder for I know Irish professor might say new blood coming in, but I would say kind of just Iberia, it's always really been this mixture of all these cultures coming in, from very ancient times, and so um, and you see it here where they're all very closely genetically related to each other, and as I mentioned to you earlier, it was said that the Basque, do share 70 to 80% of their ancestry, both Spanish and French Basque, with the other populations in Spain and southwestern France. And you can see it here how you have Spanish Aragon, Southwest French, Cantabria, Castilla-La Mancha, Valentia, and Andalusia. And so, yes, and so you can see matches here from ancient times. And you can see how you have matches here from Spain, and also Scotland's actually mentioned here too. Late Neolithic, uh, Oban, Argyll, and Betu, Scotland, and this is back over 3600 before Common Era, so that was over 5,000 years ago. We also have Sweden as well, Neolithic Sweden, over 5,000 years ago. And so you can see, these very ancient populations that were kind of connected, even around, the end of the Ice Age and a little bit after that, they were still really connected to each other because during the Ice Age, pretty much most of Northern Europe was frozen. So after the Ice Age, what most likely happened were there were a lot of tribes, not only from the Caucasus or the Middle East, but also from Southern Europe and maybe even North Africa, who actually did migrate further up north to the islands of Scotland and also to Sweden even before the Mycenaean Greeks, and this would have been around 5,000 years ago. Um, yes, so I wanted to mention that. And let me see if I can pull this up here. So you can see how this matches closely with the Basque and the Spanish, North Italians, Tuscan, but also not too far away is the French, South Dutch, Flemish, Welsh, West German, Welsh, Irish, because you know they're all closely connected to each other. These would have been some of the probably the original or indigenous populations of at least this part of Europe at the time, were really kind of a connection to Western Europe, as it were. And so I wanted to mention that real quick. So let's go back to Derbyshire here. I'm going to see if I can find any more kind of things of import to share with you guys. And again, I wanted to really touch this sample in England just to kind of really expand the horizons. That's really the Celtic ancestry or even Goidelic ancestry and Mycenaean Greek ancestry that it didn't just permeate in Ireland, but it even permeated in Scotland, Wales, and even parts of England. And so yes, and you can see here even towards later in the Middle Ages, late medieval England, All Saints, was still there's still a connection there, and Cambridgeshire, and then you see yeah, let's see, County Clare, but yes, definitely a connection there, at least to Ireland, and it'd be nice if they had more Welsh samples here as well, because I didn't really see a lot of Welsh samples on the site, but hopefully in time, maybe they'll be able to to get a little bit more with the healing support of the Welsh or the Cymry. Let me see here. Yeah, and you can see here at this time, uh, this person in Derbyshire would be mostly connected to the Spanish, the Basque, uh, Portuguese, Galicia, in northwestern Spain, North Italian, and then further away you'd have French, Flemish, South Dutch, and then modern day populations of Welsh, North German, Southeast English, Southwest, Scottish, Irish. Because again, the reason why they're further is it's accounting for the medieval kind of invasions of the Angles, the Saxons, the Jutes, and then of course even those who went Viking, and I don't want to blame the Vikings for everything or those who went Viking because they weren't perfect, but as Bjorn said, he mentioned that that hopefully things can heal in time, and I think they already are in a way, and after all, like my dad's name, my dad's name is Sigifredo, which would come from the word Siggy, which it is in fact a Norse name from goes back to the Volsunga saga and Odin and things like that in the Aesir. But as was mentioned also in the Norse folklore, even before the Aesir or the Aesir, came into what is now known as Scandinavia, there were the Vanir, or and Vanir sounds like venid in Spanish, vamos a venid. So the Vanir were uh, probably really, like for example, this person in Derbyshire, he might have been closer to for example, what we know as the Vanir, or really the people that were kind of indigenous to Western Europe, really, from before the Middle Ages, before the Dark Ages. And so yes, I wanted to mention that there. And actually, since we're mentioning about Norse folklore, let's go to Orkney, the Orkney Isles, which these are islands north of Scotland that were actually invaded by the Norse during the medieval ages. So let me see if I can pull this up here. Let me look. Yeah, so let me see if I can. Yeah, so you can see these are islands, kind of north of Scotland, of northern edge of Scotland. This would have been around 3,500 years ago. And yeah, so that would have actually been around the time of the Mycenaean Greeks of Greece. And so, or they would really have been called Magna Graecia because it would have also have included Western Anatolia or modern day Western Turkey, but it would have been even before the Turks. But anyways, I'll read this sample from Orkney 3,500 years ago. In the wind-swept landscape of Orkney, an archipelago off the northern coast of Scotland, lies an intriguing chapter from the Bronze Age. At the site called Links of Jutland, on the Westray Isle, a group of ancient remains were unearthed, giving us a glimpse into a past civilization that thrived around 3,500 years ago. Among these was a human skeleton, the bones telling a story of a person who lived and died in the middle of the Bronze Age. The remains were interred with an air of ceremony, surrounded by artifacts that offer clues to the belief, practices, and daily life of the time. Though eroded by time, the skeletal remains whispered of the person's Bronze Age diet, health, and perhaps even their social status. The grave goods found alongside the remains paint a vivid picture of an aura. Objects such as a whalebone club suggest a community that harnessed the sea's resources, while finely crafted pottery points to sophisticated domestic and ceremonial practices. The presence of flint tools and other implements speak of society adept at working with available materials to craft items needed for survival and trade. And so this was 3,500 years ago, and you notice here there's no Viking Danish or Anglo-Saxon or any of that as far as the closest matches are concerned 3,500 years ago. Here we have the Akkadian Greeks, from Mycenaean Greece, the Gauls, which would have been the kind of the one of the indigenous groups of modern day Europe, or sounds like Gallic. The Aurelians, and so the Aurelians were pretty much. I know the modern Greeks and Albanians fight with each other about who were the real ancestors of the descendants of the ancient Greeks or the Trojan War. But really, the Aurelians and Akkadian Greeks were almost like brother and sister. They were really, um, closely connected to each other. And probably the Trojan War, it wasn't just a war between two completely different groups of people. It was really almost like a civil war between brother and sister because the Akkadian Greeks and Aurelians were really both Mycenaean Greeks, probably just two groups that eventually kind of branched off. This is also probably why in Homer's works, it was said that there were certain Greek gods and goddesses that fought with the Akkadians, and there were those who fought with the Trojans, but they were really both closely related to each other. So yes, so you have so just think of the Akkadian Greeks and the Aurelians both really as Mycenaean Greeks, and the Gauls also the Gauls have been living in places like modern day Bulgaria, modern day um, Romania since ancient times, and that would have originally have been called Thrace or Thraiki, which goes back to dragon people in kind of the ancient language spoken there, Thracian language. Also in Welsh should be Draig, so Draiki, Draig, I feel like there's a connection there, probably through what we now know as, probably from the Gauls. Yes, because it goes back to ancient times, not only in Western Europe, but also even in the ancient times of kind uh, of the Balkans and Eastern Balkans, before Slavs and other groups came in. Um, so yes. Uh, so so here we have the yeah. So Pannonians were northern Aurelian tribes, that kind of were more so in the north of the Balkans, so probably like Serbia, Slovenia, those kind of areas. Maybe even also parts of Croatia. Um, and then you have the Etruscans or the Etrusci, and the Etruscans, they had settled in northern Italy during the Iron Age, and this was even before uh, the settling of the Romans, though some do say that the Etruscans and the Romans were actually very closely genetically related to each other. And I'll see if I can pull that up here. Yeah, it says here the Etruscans and ancient Romans had similar genomes, and both groups could trace their ancestry to a mix of Bronze Age pastoralists from the steppe and local Neolithic farmers. Study found that the Etruscans' genetic profile was similar to the Latins who lived in nearby Rome, and I believe the Latins were also closely connected to what would eventually become known as the Romans as well. Because again, it's all very like a close genetic connection there, just kind of branching off into different branches. Even though the two groups had different cultures and languages, the study also found that the Etruscans' genetics remained stable for over 800 years. The study also found that the Etruscans had some ancestry from people in North Africa, Central Europe, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Their gene pool also contained a large Turkish component, which is 3 times larger than other. When they mean Turkish, by the way, I want to remind people, really, what they really mean is Anatolian. So really ancestry from Anatolia from ancient times. So not necessarily from the Ottomans, but really from the indigenous people of Anatolia or modern day Turkey. Um, yes, and you can see here a large proportion of their genetic profiles coming from steppe-related ancestry during the Bronze Age. Yes. So here, so yes, so you have that, and notice here, and the reason why I wanted to mention the one of the I watch a YouTuber named ASMR Shortbread, and she's from Scotland, and she actually recently visited Portugal, and she kind of saw it as paradise. That's how she saw kind of Portugal. And notice here the closest matches to this person who lived in the Orkney Isles of Scotland 3,500 years ago was, well, Galicia is number one, which is northwest Spain, and Galician actually is a mixture of words that are shared between Spanish and Portuguese. And some say that Portuguese itself even had to come originally from the Galician language or the Galician uh, dialect, so to say. And so this is probably why Galicia is number one, because it would have been probably one of the places that they had migrated uh, north to the Isles, since ancient times. So you have Spanish Galicia at number one, you have Portuguese at number two, you have Extremadura at number three, and I'm going to talk about the Tartessians in a bit here because it's most likely strongly connected to uh, to Extremadura and Murcia, which also is very closely connected to me as well. And then you have French, North Italian, Catalonia, and Castilla y Leon. So notice you have no populations that you would think would have been connected to the sample 3,500 years ago, but here it is. Here's the match. And then you have samples connected to ancient North Macedonia, um, as well as other matches. It goes back to the Balkans. And you see here, let's see if I can pull up. See Granada, Spain, Slovenia, but this was well before Slavs and other groups and the whole crowd, as it were. Yeah, and yeah. So Italy, a lot of matches to Southern Europe and some from Western, a little bit further north in Western Europe as well, the Balkans. And so modern day populations would be closest matches would be Spanish. So here you don't have as much of a Basque influence because again, when I think of the Basque, they were really also strongly influenced by Celtic tribes who had come into Spain around well, Celtic tribe. When I mean Celtic tribes, there were Celtic tribes who also came from the south, with the Mycenaean Greeks, but there were like the Gauls, the Goidels, but there were also ones who were coming from further north, probably from France and even southwest Germany, Switzerland, North Italy, and they were coming to places like the Basque Country, Aragon, that area, around 2500, uh, 2600 years ago. So, but even before that, you had already had other populations coming in, other Celtic or Goidelic tribes, Gallic tribes coming from the south as well, or from Tortessos. And so this is probably why you don't see as much of the Basque influence here, but you still do see other places in Spain, as such as Galicia, Portugal. So definitely very much Western Iberia for sure has the strongest influence. Um, um, and you also see uh, yeah, North Italian and Greek, Thessalian. I had mentioned in Greece earlier, so there's that Greek connection from ancient times. Albanian, Dosk, and when I think of the Scottish word for Scotland, Alba, that might have a connection there. Italian and Brussels, Brussels. That's I think more so in southern Italy, and you have Tuscan, which is a bit further north. You have South Dutch, Flemish, West German, Welsh, and then Southwest and Southeast English. Um, so yes, there's that connection there to Orkney, ancient times. And so let's shift our focus from Orkney, from around this time to Spain at around this time as well, to Zapatera, or local Zapatera Falls, Iberia, and this was from around the same time. Um, and I have a bit of a closer match to this one than from Orkney, but still, you'll see the groups really kind of intersect with one another from ancient times because you see the Akkadian Greeks, the Aurelians, the Etruski. They still kind of have that shared origin between those groups. Now the way that they branch off is because here in Orkney, um, you have Gauls there, which would probably really have also have come from Thrace, or Thraiki, or from Romania, Bulgaria, so really the Eastern Balkans, if you'd like to call it that. But but here in Iberia, you had, and this is really much in southeastern Spain. You have the Macedonians and the Sanomani, and the Sanomani were a Celtic Gallic tribe that were not only seen in northern Italy, but even going back to Greece as well, and even back to, if you want to go far back to to really at around the end of the Ice Age, which would have been, around 1200 years ago. I'll show that match later on here. But let me read this match real quick. I actually had a 91% match versus all their users. It says here, at least currently, in the heart of ancient Iberia, during the enigmatic period we call the Bronze Age, the fascinating discovery tells a tale of human life and death enshrined in the soil of what is today known as Lorca, a city southeastern Spain. The individual unearthed from this era, hailing from around 1500 before Common Era, provides a window into the past, a silent narrator of a civilization's story. This person was found in a context that speaks volume about the culture they were part of. Burial set amid the hilly landscape was not a solitary affair, or affair. This was a community that valued its dead, turning them with a ceremony that resonates through the ages. Among the earthly possessions that accompanied the deceased were items of both utilitarian and symbolic value. The artifacts tell us this person was part of a society where metalworks had come to play a crucial role. Indeed, we are talking about the Bronze Age, an era defined by the alloy that revolutionized tools and weapons. The presence of intricately crafted bronze objects in the burials signifies the technological advancement and the value placed on craftsmanship. Jewelry, perhaps indicating status of personal taste, hints at the cultural practices and the aesthetics of adornment in this ancient community. So yes, I wanted to mention that there. And you can see the closest matches here are Extremadura, which is one of my closest matches, and it was very close also to the match in Orkney. North Italian, Spanish Murcia, Portuguese, Lucia, Castilla y León, Galicia, and Valentia. Those are some of the original areas that we see there. And then here are matches to Thrace, Bulgaria, which I'd mentioned from ancient times. Also Hasab Thuringia from around the Middle Ages in Germany. Minoan period Crete. So very much that ancient Greek kind of connection. Serbia, before the Dark Ages. And then notice here the closest matches we have are Spain. So we don't have the modern day Basque populations here, but we do have other parts of Spain, Southwest French, North Italian, also West Sicilian, East Sicilian, so a bit of Southern Italian. Makes me think of I watched this YouTuber called Debbie Solaris, and she's always saying, "I'm Italian, I'm Italian, I'm Italian." So when I think of that, also makes me think of maybe it could be connection to the Sicilians as well. I love her though. I love watching her content. She just has such a very um, not only a warm but a very expressive energy to her, which I enjoy. And then there's Italian and Brussels, Tuscan Greek. So there's that Greek sample, and even to the modern day Greek Thessaly, Albania, Kosovar, Bosnian, Serbian. So it'd be still to those indigenous populations. So yes, this was from Zapatera Falls, Iberia, 3,500 years ago. Okay, so before I go to the Georgia match, by the way, when I mean Georgia, I mean the country, not the state of Georgia, in the U.S. But anyways, let's go off to medieval Ireland because we mentioned Wales, we mentioned England, we mentioned Scotland, and so now let's turn our focus to Ireland, or Éire. And I'm going to show you, there are some matches here, even during the Dark Ages, that still had a relatively strong match to the Spanish and the French, as the Irish professor had mentioned. And this is in Ballyhanna in Donegal. Donegal. and this is in the northwest of Ireland. It's actually not part of Northern Ireland. It's actually part of the Republic of Ireland. But yes, no, it is there. Um, and I'm going to mention this here. Read this description. This is actually an A840 Common Era, so this would have been about around the medieval ages. It says here in the verdant landscape of Ballyhanna in County Donegal, Ireland, an archaeological discovery provides a window into the life and death of an individual from medieval Ireland, dating back to around 840 Common Era. The remains unearthed offer a tale of a person's journey through life amidst the backdrop of early medieval society. Wrapped in the embrace of the earth, these remains tell us precious little at first glance. However, through the careful analysis and dedication of archaeologists, silent bones begin to speak. They belong to a member of a community that lived more than a millennia ago, witnessing the ebb and flow of power, the spread of Christianity, and the tremor of Viking raids. The remains were found within remarkable artifacts that delineate a rich cultural tapestry. Among them was a brooch, its an intricate design hinting at a confluence of both local traditions and influences from afar, product of skilled metalwork that thrived during this era. Such a personal item might have been a cherished possession, speaking to the individual's status or personal aesthetics, and perhaps even serving as a practical garment fastener. The coal made of antler accompanied the skeleton, and it was not merely a grooming tool, but a testimony to the intricacies of daily life. The comb hints at the person's concern with appearance and hygiene, or could possibly even hold associations with trade and craft, given the value of such not value of such items in the period. And notice there's a 70% match versus all other users. So even during the medieval or dark ages, there's still a fairly strong connection there. And here you have at the time they were connected to the Belgi tribe. And the Belgi were a Celtic tribe that were in northern. They really had were connected to what we now know as the country of Belgium, and so hence the name Belgi. That's where that name comes from. Now the Ostrogoths are really a group of people that had came from Gotland, but probably the Goths even have the roots not only in Scandinavia but even back into Thrace since ancient times, because the Goths, because I saw some sample matches there, and my thought process is that some of the Goths or some of the ancient Reiki, they most likely, and this may have even led an inspiration to some of the Viking dragon ships, but they had most likely had migrated from, as the end of the Ice Age occurred and people went through Anatolia and then got into Europe. These ancient Thracian populations most likely had migrated further up north and then eventually had gotten themselves into Gotland and other parts of Europe. But this might be where the word, um, where the connection to some of the original Goths had come from, at least with the connection with Gotland. And so you have here Frank, um, and then the Franks were also very a prominent group during the medieval ages as well. And the Franks may have come from, may have had a connection to the Volsunga saga as well, um, and probably a connection to, in time, what we would eventually see as some of those as healing guardian dragons in time. But kind of a almost like a similar connection to Thrace, because really the haplogroup I2 was one of the original haplogroups of Europe since ancient times. And then around, I believe, 5,000 years ago, I2, or even maybe even later than that, I2 and I1 had kind of split off from each other. So really, they were once the same group, but then they had split. So really, this is why even for the Franks, I had mentioned Thrace or the Eastern Balkans, because this is probably where some of that connection comes from. And then you had Western Scythian, which the Western Scythians were they were a little bit different than what we know as Scythian proper, because the Western Scythians, instead of carrying mainly R1A, which is more so ancestry connected to what we now know as Aryan or Slavic, they were more so R1Bs, so really a little bit more closer to what we know out now today as Celtic. So they had a bit of a stronger connection there. And then we have Nemetes, and Nemetes comes from the word Nemetos, which means sacred grove. And really, the Nemetos is a Celtic word, and I think the Romans when they had met the Nemetes, they had saw them as unquestionably Germanic according to Tacitus, but they were really kind of a mixture of more so a blend, if you will, of Germanic and Celtic, from ancient times. Um, and so here you see the closest modern day match here is Austria. So Austria was, some say it was, kind of one, one not the only origin point, but maybe potentially one of the origin points of the Celts, that they had come from Austria. And actually, later on, I'm going to mention the Celts not only in Austria but also in southwest Germany and eastern France, close to the Black Forest, because I think that's also going to be important to point out as well. But at least for this match, Austria is very closely was one of the also origin points of what would be the Hallstatt Celts from the Iron Age, but not the only group though, because I want to mention more about the Hallstatt later on. Um, then we have Southwest French, so you still have a pretty strong connection with the Southwest French. Then Spanish Valentia, so Valentia would be kind of the southeastern coast of Spain. Then you have South Dutch, so not North Dutch, but South Dutch, because there were also uh, there's probably also like a Celtic influence in that area as well. East German, and that could maybe potentially be like a connection with the Scythians, what even with the Western Scythians. And then you have Catalonia, so Spain is still very closely connected there. Catalonia, Cantabria, and Castilla-La Mancha. You see how even during the medieval ages, even though there was a bit of a shift, you could still see that strong Spanish connection there. So you can see all the different clans, Clan Connor, Clan uh, O'Donnell. It mentions Niall of Tara. Then you can see how it's really strongly connected specifically to Donegal. Um, then you can see they're mentioned certain Bronze Age populations, even Denmark. Probably also from as mentioned here earlier was the Viking raids, because the Vikings actually or those who went Viking actually I think had a strong connection to Donegal. I think that was one of the places they did come to Denmark. But you also see Barcelona here, um, North Alpine, Roscommon, France, Greco era. And here, now you don't see the Basque as represented as much here, but you do still see a strong connection to other parts of Spain, France, South Dutch, and then further away you see Flemish, North German, Southwest Finnish, Czech, Hungarian, Croatian, Serbian, and Bosnian. So these were the groups kind of connected to, at least to this person, around 11, 1200 years ago. So let me pull up another match that was very strong as well. Um, and so here I have a bit of a stronger match here, and this is 76%. The same area, just a different person who lived during this time. It says here in the picturesque landscape of County Donegal, Ireland, on a site once bustling with medieval life, a fascinating discovery sheds light on the past. Here, amid the remnants of a bygone era, the remains of an individual who lived around 1200 years ago have given us a glimpse into the health, diet, and burial practices of early medieval Ireland. Entombed within this ancient earth was a person who belonged to a society transitioning from pagan customs to the embrace of Christianity. This era, often shrouded in mist and mystery, saw the intermingling of Norse and native Irish cultures. Yes, because as I mentioned before, the Norse had a strong connection to this area. Like it or not, I know some of the Irish would say, we have nothing to do with them. There is a connection there. Um, I could see Bjorn laughing. Like, I'm sorry, I wish I could have done things better, but no, we heal. Our subject, a skeleton seemingly ordinary in its dress, has become e- extraordinary under the scrutinous eyes of archaeologists as it reveals the story of life, death, and the passage of time. The individual was interred with the reverence characterized by the period's Christianized rituals, yet the grave goods accompanying them harken back to older traditions. Buried alongside the deceased were artifacts that speak volumes about their status and identity. Among these treasures, personal belongings such as an iron knife and a simple yet elegant pin were found, suggesting a life ingrained with the practical needs and cultural expressions of the time. You can see here the closest matches are a lot of Celtic tribes actually. The Belgi, so I mentioned the Belgi earlier. Also the Senamani, and I had mentioned the Senamani that really they go back to not only Spain and northern Italy, but also back to Greece, ancient Greece. And that's probably where the sacred groves come from. Because really, to me, sacred groves are not only an ancient Celtic practice, but to me they're also an ancient Greek practice as well. And you can see it how, in ancient Greece, sacred groves are also, or also were tree groves dedicated to gods and used to connect human and divine worlds. They were often associated with temples, and the most sacred part of the grove was the altar. Uh, and the groves were separate from the surrounding landscape and were used to perform rituals that reconnected humans with nature. And you can see here how it mentions Dodona, an oak grove that was the most famous sacred grove on the mainland. So I know some might attribute the oak to Celtic or Norse, but it really also goes back to Greece as well, ancient Greece, because that's where someone had come from. And that's what the Irish professor was mentioning about. The groves of Academe, an olive tree grove located outside of Athens and the site of the Platonic Academy. Altus, a sacred grove associated with the temple of Zeus in Olympia. The Greeks also believed that sacred groves are the homes of semi-divine beings such as nymphs born from trees. In their literature, they also envisioned a mythical grove of immortality and plenty. So there's that connection not only to the Celts of Western Europe, but even also back to Greece. And then we have the Bui, which is another Celtic tribe. Then we have Celt, just Celt in general. One of many Celts. And then here you have the closest population is Southwest French. So here, it's not so much Austrian, but more so Southwest French. And then we have the Basque returning, the Spanish Basque and the French Basque. And then you have the Spanish Aragon, Valentia, Castilla-La Mancha, Cantabria, and Castilla and Leon. So very much a Basque, Spanish, French connection here. Notice how these matches were pretty much mainly all Celtic tribes with some mix of Germanic and Greek. Kind of really I guess the word would be hodgepodge, if you will. Then here you have Celtic Iberian Alemanni mix, Copper Age Prague. Oh, what was the other one? Um, the Viking Age. Let me see here. Let's see, Serbia. No, but Spain is probably in here as well. There's just so many different matches that it's a little bit hard to read. But you can see even from let's see if I can find similar samples. Yeah, so Moldova. But notice how a lot of these samples are most closely matched to the modern day Spanish populations, as they had mentioned earlier. Um, yeah, Clan Connor, Clan Daniel. And then again, this is all very closely connected to Donegal again. And there's actually, I'll mention, I'll link the video to the Irish professor mentioning uh, one of the O'Donnells, Red Hugh O'Donnell, going to Spain during the medieval ages and talking to the Spanish king, because this is where the Spanish connection comes from, which you can see it clearly here. So whether it's Basque or Southwest French or Spanish, it's all very closely linked, as it were. And then here, even if you look at modern day populations, you can see the Spanish are very closely related, and I guess that's when, Red Hugh O'Donnell said we're the same people, he was right. North Italian, Portuguese, then you see for a little bit further is French, Austrian, East German, Czech, South Dutch, and then the modern day Southwest English, North German, and modern day Irish. Yes, so the original people that were living in Donegal even during this time were still more so connected to the Spanish than to the modern day Irish, which would later on would have a mixture of more groups from uh, like the Anglo-Saxons and other groups who had come later on during the medieval ages, aside from those who went Viking or the Norsemen. Um, yes, so I wanted to mention that. Okay, so before I wrap this up, because we've been going on for a wee while now here, and the main focus of this video was just really trying to make that connection between Spain, Greece, and pretty much the classical world. Actually, let me see if I can find some matches to Mycenaean Greece from ancient times, just in case if I get any Albanian or modern Greek viewers who want to kind of go at it in the comments, want to make this clear about the Mycenaean Greeks. So here we have Mycenaean, Magdalia, Akkadian Greece. So Magdalia is a place in Greece, and I'll see if I can pull it up. Again, I know they might want to go at it with each other, but and this was during the time of Mycenaean Greece, so this would be pretty much a little bit further south, southwest in Greece, around 2.5 hours away from Athens. And then to Delphi. They've actually been having a lot of fires out in Athens lately, so just like here in the Northwest, so if anyone can send some healing energy to them, I'm sure they would greatly appreciate it. But anyways, let me share this here. In the verdant landscape of ancient Akkadian Greece, a remarkable discovery was unearthed that provides, and this was the match I had here was 89% match versus all their users. Was unearthed that provides valuable insight into the Mycenaean civilization that thrived during the late Bronze Age. The significant archaeological find, a site of human remains from around 1500 before Common Era, was discovered among the remnants of a society known for its legendary heroes and complex palatal structures. This individual from the Mycenaean era, which is often linked to Homeric tales and opulent sites of Tiryns and Mycenae, provides a tangible connection to a world that has long captivated historians and archaeologists. Era from which these remains hail is distinctive for sophisticated art, architecture, and advances in military affairs as well as evident in the intricate frescoes, linear B script, and formidable war chariots of the period. Found within the archaeological context were both artifacts that bespeak the cultural and ritual practices of the Mycenaeans. Among these were intricately designed pottery, precious jewelry, and weapons which not only served as funerary goods to accompany the deceased in afterlife, but also indicated the social status and potential roles of the individuals within a society. You see, the closest match here to the sample was not the only the Akkadian Greeks, as someone would like to think, but also their brothers and sisters, the Aurelians, because really that's what they were. They were really brothers and sisters to each other. Even though they fought each other, they were, whether you were a Trojan, or whether you were, Trojan on the Trojan side or an Akkadian on the Akkadian side. We are brothers and sisters, or hermanos y hermanas, which would be brother and sister in Spanish. So you have the Aurelians, the Pannonians, which are northern Aurelians, the Samnites, and so the Samnites, that's where the Romans got their the gladiator class from, was from the Samnites, because they were a pretty powerful group of warriors that inhabited southern Italy, and I believe Debbie, in particular, would probably connect a lot with them, because they were that's what they were. They were warrior people as well. Um, so yeah, so you see Samnite, Macedonian, and all that. So in the closest matches here isn't what you would think it would be. It's not the modern day Greek population. It's not even the modern day Albanian population. In fact, it's actually modern day Spanish Andalusia, North Italian, Murcia, Valentia, Extremadura, Catalonia, uh, Portuguese, and Spanish Castilla y León. So yeah, so notice how that is the case. So that I think that pretty much kind of settles that argument between the modern Greeks and then the modern Albanians. Um, so I really think most of that anger really comes from the Slavs and Avars and Huns and Ottomans and all that, during the Middle Ages. But even before that, there were other groups that had already had lived there and had sailed long before, and some who still remained. And so here you have Crete. And again, I think things can heal over time. I just think, it's more so just more of a confusion, like people, I think, are confused of who their ancestors are. I think I even spoke to someone from Serbia. He told me I had some Serbian blood because I liked mayonnaise, funnily enough. But anyways, he told me he wanted to know who were the kind of the gods and goddesses of Serbia before the Slavs, just because again, and nothing against the Slavs per se, but just to really pay, to really kind of acknowledge the indigenous roots of the people there, is really, I think, is also important. And actually, I think in my ancestry test, I think um, part of the test said I do have like a little bit of I think they called it Eastern European or Baltic Slavic. It was like a little bit of Ukrainian and a little bit of even Polish, just a little bit. But yeah, and it just shows that it's okay to mix, and it's okay to come together, because that's it's important to do that, because if we didn't, people would be inbred, and we wouldn't want that. And I've actually seen problems with that already. I've watched this YouTuber, and I'll have to find her name, but she talks about the Mormon look, in Mormonism, and it's generally not a good thing, because of only dating other Mormons, and most Mormons being genetically similar. It's over time it hasn't been a very fruitful outcome. So she wanted to really kind of hone in on that, of really wanting to get out of that mindset and really kind of expand her horizons, as it were. So that was something that she had mentioned. So here we have, Mannonian period Crete, ancient times, as well as other groups. Um, you can see modern day populations are most closely related not only to the different groups in Spain and Portuguese and Galicia, but also even the Spanish Basque and the French Basque are also closely related because that probably goes back to Tortesos and also back to the ancient Iberian connection, with everyone kind of eventually mixing with each other. And then we have, we still do have Greek, so it's still there. It's, because, it's still there. The Greeks are still Greek. It's just in addition to the only things, I want both the Albanians and Greeks to understand is instead of getting into this not middle age, middle-aged, medieval age, conflict of all the Slavs are the Ottoman, and then they're fighting each other. It's like, yeah, wait a minute. Remember, remember your ancestors beyond the Dark Ages. So, we have to just remind them of that. So yeah, so you still have Greek, you still have Albanian, and you still have Thessaly. So hopefully, and Kosovar. So hopefully that settles that debate once and for all between the Greeks and Albanians, or well, it may not. I don't know. Knowing those two, I think they'll still go at it for a time, but whatever. You can only do so much. But anyways, then you have Italian, Abruzzo, West Sicilian, Tuscan, and you have French and South Dutch. So they're also related. And yeah, it's all connected. Okay, so before we go to Georgia, 'cause that's the last match I want to cover. I actually did cover Ice Age Spain and Ireland in a previous video if you want to watch that. But let me cover Greece during the Minoan period. Actually, when I look at this fresco, it reminds me of my friend Athena. Like it's just kind of like when I look at the fresco and I look at the energy, it makes me think of Athena because I think even the goddess Athena has roots not only in Mycenaean folklore or even during the times of the Trojan War, but even before during the Minoan period. So I wanted to speak about the Minoans because I feel like it would be unfair to mention about Greece without mentioning the Minoans because the Minoans were in particular um, very much um, they contributed very much a strong feminine energy to Greece is how I would like to say it. um, but in a good way, like well, maybe not always so good, but sometimes it was good. It just kind of had to be balanced over time. I could hear her saying, but so anyways, here it's an 89% match versus all their users, so it's a very high percentage. And then it says here, in the heart of Thessaly, Greece. This was in 1861 before Common Era, so almost 4,000 years ago. In the heart of Thessaly, Greece, a region steeped in myth and history. A remarkable discovery tells us a fascinating story from the Middle Haddalic period, a transitional era around 3,900 years ago, which bridged the early urban cultures of the Bronze Age with later, more complex societies. The Aleta Locas site has yielded previous insight into the enigmatic chapter of ancient Greek history where human life once intertwined with the fabric of a now distant past came to an end. And Eleti Lokas, I have to see where that is in Greece. Um, oh, it's actually in northern Greece, actually. Um, but where in northern Greece? Hmm. Oh, it might be in a place called Elati. Elati, I think that's how you pronounce it. And how far? Um, it's a village actually. Looks really nice though. You even get snow there. Yeah, so it's around 3 hours north of Delphi, and I actually had a match to Delphi as well, so that's why and also almost 4 hours to Athens. Okay, so very much in the north. And so okay, let me finish reading this before we continue. This individual in question was part of a landscape that was seeing significant social and cultural transformations. Their final resting place was accompanied by an array of artifacts that provide a narrative of the life, beliefs, and practices of a community on the cusp of a significant transition toward what would eventually flourish as the Mycenaean civilization, famed for its palatal states of the late Bronze Age. Among the grave goods, a range of pottery styles offer a silent testimony to the aesthetics, sensibilities, and daily practices of the time. Some vessels may have served as everyday utensils, while others, more refined, might hint at ritual use or symbolic offerings. Such items were staples in funerary customs, uh, uh, appreciating. Appreciating, that's an interesting word.
Propitiate.
Propitiate, okay. Win or regain the favor of by doing something that pleases them. I wonder where that word propitiate comes from. I think it might come from Latin, yes. Okay, so it does come from Latin propitiate. Thinking you would say it propitiat. How would you say it in Spanish?
Propiciar.
Propiciar, okay. So in Spanish, that's probably where it comes from, propiciar. Okay, so propitiate, propiciar. Okay, that makes sense now. And then in ancient Greek, it'd be a very different word. Elismos. So, okay, so definitely at least from Latin. Okay. Um, yeah. Fishing the gods or accompanying the deceased into the afterlife. Okay. So the closest samples connected to this Minoan person from almost 4,000 years ago were the Samnites that I mentioned earlier. This is where the gladiators had come from, the gladiator class, Macedonians. We still have the Aurelians here, so notice the Akkadian Greeks aren't here, but the Aurelians are still there, which would suggest that the Aurelians may have even been there even before the Mycenaean Greeks. That even though they had come with the Mycenaean Greeks, that they themselves were still there even beforehand to an extent, or at least in some aspect, yes. The Dacians and the Dacians and then the Thracians and I mentioned earlier the Dacians. Well, the Thracians were definitely of the Eastern Balkans, but so were the Dacians as well. And this would also be connected to the Raichi people as well, which also can be spelled with a D rather than just a T. So this might be also connection to the Dacians as well. The closest populations to this sample would be Tuscan, North Italian, West Sicilian. There's I'm Italian. There she is. Italian Abruzzo, Spanish Andalusia, Spanish Murcia, Extremadura, and Albanian Tosk. So here you have a definitely a bit more of a representation of definitely southern Italy, because southern Italy really, since ancient times, was also part of Magna Graecia, where a lot of Greeks would go there, and they would settle those areas. Maybe even part of Tuscany as well. Um, but you still see a strong connection with Spain as well, particularly in the south, in Andalusia, Murcia, and Extremadura, or as my friend would say, Los Dos, as Athena would say. So yes. And then you can see um, sample matches here include Italy. You can see even here Ashkenazi, Germany, because some of them had ancestry actually connected to the ancient Greeks themselves. Some of them did, yes. Maybe not all of them, but at least some of them, yes. um, then Mycenaean, um, then Italy, Hungary. There she is. No, and then you can see, yeah. Um, yeah, and then here we have matches here to Spain, uh, Portuguese, Galicia, North Italy, Albania, Kosovar. So again, Greek Thessaly. So again, even Ashkenazi here. So again, for any of people who are arguing between the Albanians and Greeks, who are the real descendants of the ancient Greeks, well, again, here they're mentioned both here. So East Sicilian, and the reason why you even have some even like a Jewish connection here is because some of the ancient Greeks, I think it was even the Spartans themselves, who said that they felt like they uh, that some of the tribes of Israel were almost seen as kind of like cousins in a way, or at least not necessarily directly related entirely, but at least having a connection of some kind because you have to remember they had come from the Middle East, they had come from the Caucasus area, so they kind of had spread out, but they also kind of had intermixed with each other. And that would even include the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians, I want to mention, where the name Europe, um, Europa, comes from because um, it actually comes from Phoenician princess. So now the Phoenicians were a little bit different than the other 12 tribes because they had left that area, or at least some of them had left that area long before, and they had been sailing around and, and mixing with all different groups of people. But let me mention the Greek story. Uh, in Greek mythology, Europa was a Phoenician princess who was abducted by Zeus and taken to Crete, where she became the first queen of Crete and gave birth to three sons. Minos, the first leader of Crete's Minoan era, which lasted from around 2600 to 1450 before Common Era, is known for the labyrinth and the Minotaur. And then Rhadamanthys ruled the Cyclades Islands. Sarpedon ruled Lycia, according to some legends. The story goes that Zeus fell in love with Europa, which was playing with her friends on the seashore of Phoenicia. And Phoenicia, for those who don't know, some people might say, well, where was Phoenicia located? So Phoenicia would have been located in modern day Lebanon, and that would have been since ancient times. So not necessarily in what we now know today as Syria or Syrian. The Syrians, yeah, from series. Yeah, I think Debbie would get a kick out of that, and maybe even my friend Julie. Yeah, so they weren't necessarily in Syria or Israel or the modern day areas of those modern day locations, but they were at least adjoining too. It says here its location along major trade routes led its inhabitants, called Phoenicians, to become notable merchants, traders, and colonizers in the first millennia before Common Era. And you can already see that connection with not only the Mycenaean Greeks, but even going back to the Tartessians, Tartessos, in southern Spain during the 12th century before Common Era, and you can see it right here. Um, so Yeah, so I wanted to mention that there. Um, yes, so for anyone who didn't know the, okay, so let me read a little bit more of this. Phoenicia took the form of a white bull to carry her away to Crete. Dopale married Astaris, the king of Crete, who adopted her sons. She was worshipped in Crete as Helotus. A festival called Helotia was held in her honor. The myth of Europa has been popular since ancient times and has been depicted in many ancient pieces of ceramics and coins. Some say the legend of Europa may reflect the historical colonization of the Mediterranean by the Phoenicians from 1200 to 800. Yeah, so there's that connection there too. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of make that connection to ancient Greece and even where the word uh, Europe came from itself, that word. Okay, so the last match I want to do, the match, well, no, actually, there's one more match I want to do because Uncle Herman, he always calls me the Celtic healer. So here, even though my match here is not as closely related as other users, because I guess there's a lot more people who might have a bit of a closer connection, at least from a genetic distance, or at least, from genetic distance is essentially, how close are you genetically to certain groups of people. So technically, I'd be closer to this sample or this person genetically who lived 2,500 years ago than the person in Canterbury or in Derbyshire. The only difference is that even though I'm closer to this person than the person in Derbyshire, I'm still a lot closer than other people to that person from Derbyshire, uh, than than I am to other people that have used this website. We're here. There's just more people who are genetically closer to this match. So even though it is one of my closest genetic distance matches, there's still just some people who just tend to maybe they just I'm not saying that they didn't mix as much, but it just yeah. Hopefully that makes sense. But yes, no, this is a Celtic burial in southwest Germany and Lubra. I prefer pronouncing it Lubra. So like how you would say Edinburgh in Scotland, you would say Lubra. Lubra Romer Hilgel. Um, you can see here closest matches are Northern Irbilians, which would be Pannonians. They had Cheruski, and I remember I mentioned earlier Cheruski. Pretty much it would be like my dad's name and my uncle Herman's name, and that would be come from Herman Siggy. Scordisci it was a Celtic tribe that came into the Balkans at around the Iron Age. So that was when they came a little bit from the east. Probably also a little bit from the steppe as well. Um, yeah, yeah, that area. Gaul, Aurelians. So you still see Aurelians have a pretty strong connection there. Modern day populations. Let's see. And by the way, the Celts during this time they actually did trade with the Greeks who had settled in southern France. That's they traded different wares, things like that, like metals and wine and the like. So you can see here closest matches are Spanish Catalonia, French, Portuguese, Galicia, Castilla y León, Murcia, Extremadura, and South Dutch. So so the Dutch, they at least the South Dutch, they strike again. But hopefully not in a bad way. Maybe they strike with the plating or something. um, let's see here. Let's see if I can get some similar samples here. Maybe the website. Uh, yeah, no, it's still there. So you can see here the Y-DNA, instead of it being the typical only R1b, I'm going to see if I can pull this up again. Yeah, sometimes this website can get a little bit wonky, but yeah, so you see the Y-DNA here, instead of it being the usual, oh, I don't know why I did that again. So instead of it being the usual R1b, it's also J2A2, which I think even there was a YouTuber I watch, I think his channel name is Celtic History Decoded. He actually talked a lot about the whole stats also being connected to this haplogroup. And the origin of J2A2, or G2A2, not J2, my bad. This comes from it pretty much branched out of Anatolia, long ago, and it came from Neolithic farmers and herders. Yeah, so around the end of the Ice Age, they were already, originally in Anatolia, in the Middle East, in the Caucasus, and then they had eventually got into Greece. And so, think about, people who were herders of probably like cows and goats and sheep. And I'll see in particular, uh, see if I can, yeah, yeah. So it would have said here, R1b in particular domesticated the cattle, but not J2, G2. Um, just see if I can find any. Yeah, so they had pig farmers, um, but also goats and sheep were also domesticated since ancient times. So I guess aside from being eventually have raising cattle or bulls, cows and bulls, they also raised pigs and goats and sheep. So they were very multifaceted in that way. Yes, so you can see how it goes into not only Germany, Southwest Germany, but also Hungary, uh, France, Italy, um, even Denmark, Nemetes, Sweden. Um, but notice this match also had a lot of matches with the Spanish as well. And see here, Scordisci, because there are a lot of northern Celtic tribes who came to northern Spain later on, a little bit after this, and yeah, they were mostly connected to a lot Spanish, French, South Dutch, but also Flemish, West German, Northeast Welsh, English, Austrian, Serbian. Yeah, so it wasn't too far away, but at least at this time they were most genetically. The closest connection they had was really with the Spanish, the French, the Portuguese, and the Dutch or South Dutch. During this time. Um, so that would be for the Hallstatt Celts. Okay, so the last thing I want to mention before I wrap up this video, because I want to mention the sample I got during the end of the Ice Age. And I did this in my previous video, but I want to do this because this is where it was said that probably the first quote unquote white people were the one of the first people that weren't necessarily just that didn't just have a yellowish skin tone like the Syrians or even people from East Asia, but also like really like just even a bit of a lighter skin tone. That they really had come from this area in the Middle East and Caucasus, from ancient times, and they would have been most closely connected to the Cenomani, Well, actually, no, the Aurelians, which I had mentioned before, Pannonians, the Samnites, Cenomani, and the Macedonians. See this picture here. This would have been around the end of the Ice Age when people were still living in caves. And then should be mostly connected to people in modern day Valencia, Andalusia, Murcia, so a lot of southern Spain, Extremadura, Castilla Leon, North Italian, Catalonia, y Castilla-La Mancha. So we don't see as much as modern day Basque populations, but we definitely do see a lot of other parts of Spain represented here. See different matches here. Let's see what's you see Greek, Albanian, Kosovar, Tuscan, West Sicilian, Bulgarian, Romanian. You don't see any Ashkenazi in this one, but you do see other matches here. Tuscan. So very, very Greek, very much Spanish, very really probably also connection to the Mycenaeans and also the Minoans as well, and maybe even could have had a connection to Libyans from North Africa. Some say that the Minoans might have come, in fact, from Libya from ancient times, and those were kind of the people that one of the pharaohs of Egypt had kind of showcased in. I'll see if I can pull it up here. That he had showcased the 4 different kinds of people. Yeah, so it would have been the Libyans, the Nubians, Asiatic, which to me were most likely the Syrians, and then the ancient Egyptians. That's yeah. So right here. And then Seti, which most likely comes from the word Set. He was a pharaoh of Egypt at around 1300, and he was the son of Ramses the First. But before him, there was another one. Yeah, there was King Tut as well, but there was another one that was even before him. I'd have to find who was the pharaoh during 1500. Yeah, Thomos the First and Hep and Amen Holten. Yeah. Yeah, I think King Tut was the one actually who restored paganism actually to ancient Egypt. And I think that's why he was very well known because he had restored polytheism. Yes, ancient Egypt. 1332. Okay, so there's one more match I wanted to do before I go, and this match was, it might even been well, I wanted to show a match in Neolithic Portugal real quick. This is just from 7,000 years ago. This just shows some of the original people who lived in the area during the time. They're most closely connected to the Rati tribe, which was a kind of a crossroads between Celtic, Etruscan, and Italic. Um, I believe I think that was. Oh, I'll read this again just to be sure. Yeah. The Rati were a confederation of Alpine tribes whose language was and customs derived from the Etruscans. It is thought that they were originally Etruscans based in northern Italy, displaced by the attacking Gauls and fled into the Alps. And by 500 Common Era, they controlled much of central Switzerland. The northern Rati tribe traded and allied with their Celtic northern neighbors. Yeah, so we're an indigenous population. And then you had the Iberians, the Vascones, and then the Visigoths, and the Aquitani. The Visigoths, they might have even have come into, or those related to them might have even, also been in Spain or Portugal since ancient times. And here you can see matches with French, Cantabria, Aragon, Basque, French Basque in particular, actually. And this would have been one of the indigenous haplogroups of Europe, which would be I2AA. I know here it's saying Russia, Ukraine, all that, but in Denmark. But really, I2 actually separated from J, or no, I and J actually separated from each other 40,000 years ago, not in Ukraine, Russia, or Northern Europe, but it was really actually because that they would have been frozen at the time. They actually separated in West Asia, so closer to Anatolia, 40,000 years ago. So still that strong connection to Anatolia, even 40,000 years later. So you can see here at the time, they were connected to the French, Basque, and then other groups of Spain, then also Spanish Basque, and a little bit further still the Irish, the Welsh are there, the English. So, and I think I had a match even from like, I'll just do this real quick before I end the stream since I'm already here. There was a match I had from like 22,000 years ago, and this was during the Ice Age, where you can see tribes here were connected to Belgi, Gael, Celtic, Parisii, because again, during the Ice Age, that's where they had to pretty much live. And you can see here, this is the modern day South Dutch, North German, so pretty much modern day Northern European populations are right there. Because again, they couldn't have lived up there because it was frozen in ice, so they would have had to have lived further south. But some of them, instead of living in the Caucasus, they were still in Europe or in North Africa. So you can see here the South Dutch, the North German, Southeast English, Irish, West Scottish, Southwest English, Danish, French, all kind of what we see as more so the northern modern day European populations. At one point, they had lived in Granada, which is pretty much in a cave in Granada, which is pretty much almost the gateway of North Africa. They had lived there uh, 22,000 years ago. You can see even this goes into Belbeek, Emsbury, which I think is in England, Kilcheen. Yeah, Ireland, Copper Age, very ancient time. Yeah, so some of the original people who had lived here 22,000 years ago, even before people who would be more closely related to the modern day Spanish had come from the Caucasus, because really you have to remember a lot of the Spanish really didn't just come from Europe or North Africa. They had also had come from the Caucasus and from Anatolia. They were the ones who eventually had brought farming and those kind of things to Spain um, after the Ice Age. So before the Ice Age, this was pretty much I don't know if you'd call it the Stone Age, or maybe the Stone Age was after the Ice Age. I'll have to check. Stone Age was when? Okay, so Stone Age, 3,000, 30,000 before Common Era. Yeah, so still around the time of the Stone Ages, I guess the best way to say it is that we were kind of getting out of that period of when I think of Stone Ages, I think of people throwing rocks at each other, or actually kind of what happened in England recently, where I saw the YouTube video where there was a guy, I think he had a concrete cinder block brick thrown at him or something. So, well, I don't, I'm not, I feel bad for him because it's not something that is very favorable, but yes, that's I don't know, maybe during the Ice Age, I don't know if some people did that back in the populations who lived in Ice Age Granada 22,000 years ago, maybe. Um, but no, you could definitely see here that I guess before the introduction of farming and before people had come from Anatolia and the Caucasus, uh, it really shows that the Northern Europeans, in fact, or modern day Northern Europeans, actually, in fact, did come from not only Southern Europe, but even probably even other parts of uh, North Africa during ancient times. Um, yes, and maybe this could lead to the credence of Cheddarman, because I know there's a lot of arguments with Mr. Cheddarman here that people, they don't think that a blue-eyed person could have such dark skin. But to me, my kind of thought process is that maybe before the Ice Age, maybe there were. Well, I think blue eyes had come after the Ice Age. I think it was a little bit after, and it had originated not only in not only in England but also in uh, Spain, actually, in Asturias. And I'll see if I can pull it up. Um, man with blue eyes, or first man with blue eyes in Spain, because this would have been a little bit later than Mr. Cheddarman. Well, I don't know. Let me look. Researchers discovered the remains of a 7,000-year-old man with blue eyes in the uh, Brana Rentoro cave system in northwestern Spain. The man named La Brana lived during the Mesolithic period, which lasted from about 10,000 to 5,000 years ago. He's a hunter-gatherer with dark skin and black or brown hair, and genetic testing showed that he was genetically different from most modern Europeans. It showed that he had African features and pigmentation genes with blue eyes that are more commonly associated with Northern Europeans. Yes. Researchers believe that Labrana's blue eyes were the result of a mutation. Um, Previous research suggests the earliest mutation in eye-colored genes that led to blue eyes may have occurred during 10,000 years ago in people living near the Black Sea, which would be like the Caucasus region that I had mentioned earlier, probably around maybe the country of Georgia. This discovery of La Brana one may also explain why Scandinavia has more blue-eyed people today, potentially, as poor conditions in the region may have delayed the agricultural revolution, leaving more genetic traces of the hunter-gatherer past. That could be a possibility. Um, there also could have been people who had traveled north. Maybe in the Ice Age, maybe there were some who had traveled north, and then others of us who traveled further south. So that could have been another connection there. There could have been a myriad of other things that happened as well. My guess is most people probably traveled further south, and then they got into Europe through Anatolia. But yeah, that's a connection there. But yeah, this would have been 22,000 years ago. Now, I think there was a match that I had in Iberia this was like one of my closest matches. It was actually 95%. And here you notice, yeah, so we'll read this real quick. This will probably be the last one we will read, and then we'll end the stream. The heart of ancient Iberia, nestled within the cavernous entrance of the Cueva del Malmuerzo, which means bad lunch in Spanish, and the Cueva means cave, I believe. So cave of the bad lunch, because I guess they had struggled to eat during the Ice Age. Near Granada, archaeologists unearthed a remarkable testament to prehistoric life set of human remains dating back over 20,000 years ago. The individual from an era when ice sheets still ruled Europe. I'll see if I can let me pull up a map of Europe during the Ice Age, just so I can show you guys how Europe was during the Ice Age. So you can see how, it would have been very hard. It would have been very hard for people to have settled further north, because notice how what what is now England, Ireland, um, and in Scandinavia, it's all covered. It was all covered in an ice sheet, so they had to have migrated further south, unless if they, it was even probably even more frozen than what we now know as modern day Greenland. But yeah, so um, the skeletal remains were delicately conserved, or actually, archaeologists unearthed a remarkable testament to prehistoric life set of human remains dating back. Yeah, this individual from an era offers profound insights into the lives of people who thrived during the Upper Paleolithic period. Skeletal remains were delicately conserved, telling a tale of existence amid the rugged Iberian landscape where survival was etched day by day. Pilgrimages through perilous terrains, procurement of food, and enigmatic soul of human social structures were all part of the individual's narrative. Meticulous excavations around the remains further enriched the historical tapestry, leading to an assemblage of artifacts that spoke volumes of the cultural practices of the time. Among these were flint tools whose craftsmanship reflected a sophisticated understanding of material properties and adaptability to the varied demands of Paleolithic life. Also unearthed were ornamental objects, suggesting that even in three earlier epochs of human history, desire for aesthetic expression and perhaps spiritual or social signaling was evident. These artifacts served as a bridge to understanding the non-material culture, or echoes of community ritual, and perhaps the earliest form of personal adornment. So here, notice you have Belgian and Phoenician. So Phoenician, seems like those connected to Phoenicians were around since ancient times. Not only six, 7, 8,000 years ago, but even as far back as 22,000 years ago. So you have Belgian, yeah, number 13 is there. Um, Senimani, Iberian, Belgi, Aquitini, and Senimani. Yeah, really, to me, Aurelian is the 14th, right? I think of kind of the Azem of 14, if you will, or pretty much for a better picture. Uh, yeah, so yeah, pretty much the. I'm gonna see if I can get Convocation 14 just to show you guys the 14 zodiac signs. So pretty much you would have the 12 zodiac signs or the 12 tribes there. The Litabus would be number 13 and makes me think of the Phoenicians. And then the 14th, I think, would be kind of like the Aurelians or the Azem or the kind of and I think in ancient Egyptian they have a word very similar that would be Atem. So very very similar kind of terminology there. So it's really a connection with Egypt, Greece, and the Caucasus. It's all kind of intertwined, as it were. Like instead of living in a vacuum, it's more intertwined. Um, Pre-dynastic solar deity who came to be associated with the evening or with the setting sun. Yeah. So to me, that would be kind of the connection. So anyways, this sample back 22,000 years ago, instead of it being closely connected to modern day Northern European populations, here we have the Southwest French, the French Basque, Spanish Aragon, Cantabria, Andalusia, Valentia, Castilla-La Mancha, and then Spanish Basque. So here we do have both Basque present. It just seems like the French Basque this might be a little bit closer. Just a wee bit. Un poquito más. Should be a little bit more in Spanish. So you have a lot of different matches here. Iron Age Cornwall. Makes me think of them when they say, we'll fight you till a better end, and then we'll still love you. Yeah. Then here we have different groups. Spain, French Basque, Spanish Basque, French, South Dutch, North Italian. Okay, so we do have some, oh, I don't know if I want to say northern. Well, I guess you could sort of say northern. Yeah, yeah, French, South Dutch, Austrian, East German, Croatian, Serbian, Bosnian, Kosovar, Tuscan. So yeah, 22,000 years ago. Okay, guys, I think I'm going to end the stream here. It was a long stream to do, but I think we can finally end it here. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys had a good time watching. And I'll be off for now. Hasta luego, hasta luego, slanga full, and bye for now, guys. I'll have to see how to say bye for now in Welsh, actually, before I go. Let's see. So I think I'm going to try to pronounce it to be Hwild am each roll, or Hwild far. Yeah, I might need some practice on that one. But anyways, yeah, I'll be off for now, guys, and I will take care.